Hello everyone, welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we bring you 7 deeply disturbing true camping horror stories that will make you question what really happens when you venture into the wilderness alone. These are not fictional tales spun for entertainment, but authentic encounters shared by real people who experience the unthinkable in places most of us will never dare to visit. Each account has been carefully documented and verified through first-hand testimonials and corroborating evidence. The wilderness holds mysteries that defy rational explanation. And tonight, you will hear directly from those who survived encounters that changed them forever. If you appreciate genuine horror content that exposes the dark realities lurking beyond civilization, subscribe to Dark Fears and hit the notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the unexplained. After you finish listening to these harrowing accounts, we want to hear from you in the comments below about your own experiences with the unknown. Now, settle in as we explore the terrifying truth about what waits in the woods when the sun goes down. My name is Alex, and this happened during what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend camping trip with 2 of my closest friends, Mark and Jenna. We had decided to escape the city chaos and head to Pine Ridge Forest, a remote area known for its dense woods and scenic trails. From the start, everything felt off. The forest was quieter than expected, almost eerily silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves. We set up camp near a small creek, the perfect spot according to the map we had. Night fell quickly, and the temperature dropped. I remember the firelight casting long shadows, the way the trees seemed to lean closer, listening. Mark was telling a story about a hiker who vanished years ago in these woods, and Jenna laughed nervously. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching us. Around 11 p.m., while I went to refill the water from the creek, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the tree line. I froze, heart hammering. But when I blinked, it was gone. I chalked it up to my imagination. But when I returned to camp, Mark and Jenna were nowhere in sight. My voice called out, echoing back. But the only answer was the whisper of the wind. Something was out there. And it wasn't just watching. It was waiting. Panic set in as I searched for Mark and Jenna. Their backpacks were still at the campsite, untouched. But the path we had taken earlier was almost swallowed by darkness. My flashlight barely cut through the dense forest, illuminating twisted roots and fog creeping along the ground. Every snap of a branch made me jump, every rustle a potential threat. I remembered the old stories about Pine Ridge, how hikers would vanish, leaving behind only footprints that seemed to disappear mid-trail. I cursed myself for not taking them seriously. I shouted their names repeatedly, but no answer came. Then, I noticed something even more disturbing. Our footprints heading toward the creek had vanished, as if the earth itself had swallowed them. I stumbled upon a small clearing and froze. There, etched into the mud, were handprints. Not mine, not Mark's or Jenna's, smudged and elongated as though something with unnatural strength had pressed them into the ground. My heart raced. The night felt heavier, suffocating, as if the forest itself had turned against me. A low whisper carried through the air. I couldn't make out the words, but it felt personal, like it knew me, like it was mocking me. Something unseen was here, something that had claimed my friends before me. I stumbled forward, heart hammering, my flashlight shaking in my grip. Every step felt wrong, as if the forest had shifted around me, leading me deeper into its grip. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thump, like footsteps circling behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. The sound was unnervingly deliberate, echoing through the trees. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, maybe it was wind. But then I saw them. Mark's flashlight, far off in the distance, flickering like a dying star. Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived. As I ran toward the light, I noticed something impossible. The beam of Mark's flashlight was moving in unnatural jerks, as if someone, or something, was jerking it from behind a tree. I shouted his name again, but a distorted whisper answered back. My stomach dropped. I knew, instinctively, that whatever had taken my friends was aware of me now. The deeper I went, the darker the forest became, and the familiar paths seemed to twist and loop back, disorienting me. Every tree looked the same, and the forest floor seemed endless. Then I tripped and fell into a shallow ditch, scraping my hands and knees. Looking up, I saw a shadow at the edge of the trees. Tall, hunched, and impossibly fast. It disappeared before I could focus, leaving only the echo of its laughter in my ears. The forest had me. I forced myself to keep moving, adrenaline pushing me past the pain of my scraped hands and knees. Every branch I pushed through seemed to claw at my clothes, every rustle a threat. I tried to retrace our original path, but the forest had changed, or maybe I had. The creek I remembered was nowhere in sight. Then a whisper floated through the darkness. "Alex, come closer." It was low, almost seductive, and impossibly familiar. My stomach churned, but a part of me wanted to obey, to see what or who it was. I ignored it and ran, hoping to find any sign of Mark and Jenna. Suddenly, I stumbled into a clearing where our campsite should have been. But it wasn't our camp. The fire was smoldering unnaturally blue, and 3 tents, ours, were torn open, flapping in the wind, empty. My flashlight illuminated footprints that weren't human, twisted and jagged, leading into the heart of the forest. I felt a presence behind me. Spinning around, I caught a glimpse of something crouched in the shadows, hunched, impossibly thin, its eyes reflecting an unnatural yellow glow. I didn't wait to find out more. I sprinted toward the twisted footprints, hoping they would lead me to my friends. The forest seemed alive, whispering as I followed the footprints. Each step felt heavier, as though invisible hands were pressing down on me, urging me to stop. I called out again, "Mark, Jenna!" My voice echoed in hollow mockery. Then I saw it. A torn piece of Jenna's jacket snagged on a low branch, torn and smeared with mud. My chest tightened. She had been here. The footprints led to a small ravine. I hesitated at the edge, peering down into the darkness below. Something moved. Not quite visible, but the shadows shifted in ways that defied logic. A low growl, almost human, reverberated from the depths, making my skin crawl. I dropped the flashlight and it rolled toward the edge, catching a glimpse of something crouched, elongated, with limbs too long for a human. It didn't move like any creature I'd seen, but there was intent in its posture, as if it was studying me. Fear made me stumble backward, and I slipped, rolling into the ravine. Pain exploded through my shoulder, but I scrambled up and ran, ignoring the scratches tearing at my skin. The forest seemed endless, a maze designed to trap me. And I realized something horrifying. This thing wasn't just hunting my friends. It was hunting me too. Hours passed, though I had no sense of time. The forest closed in around me, and exhaustion gnawed at my mind. Every snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. Every rustle whispered of pursuit. I stumbled upon a faint trail, almost hidden under fallen leaves, and hoped it led to safety, or to my friends. Then I saw them. Mark and Jenna, or what was left of them. They sat huddled together in a hollowed tree trunk, unresponsive, eyes wide and blank. My heart screamed relief. But as I approached, they didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. I reached out, and the forest itself seemed to recoil. Above them, a shadow shifted in the branches, a grotesque figure hunched with limbs that twisted like broken trees. It tilted its head, observing me, its yellow eyes piercing the darkness. I realized, with horror, that this wasn't just an animal. It wasn't just a ghost. Whatever this was, it fed on fear, on confusion, on hope. I had no choice. I grabbed Mark, shaking him, but he remained limp. Jenna's hand brushed mine, icy cold. And then the figure leapt down, disappearing into the night. The only sounds were our ragged breaths and the whispering forest, mocking me, warning me that the night was far from over. I dragged Mark and Jenna, desperate, through paths that twisted impossibly. Every step brought new horrors, branches reaching like claws, animal eyes glinting in the shadows, whispers that sounded like my own voice, repeating, distorted. I couldn't trust my senses anymore. The forest was alive, taunting me, reshaping itself. Suddenly, a clearing appeared. I thought I had escaped, but the ground was littered with strange symbols carved into tree trunks, circles and jagged lines that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. The air was thick, heavy, almost sticky. I could hear faint footsteps approaching from all directions, slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. I felt hands brush against my back, not human, not alive, and stumbled forward, heart racing. Mark groaned faintly, but Jenna whispered something I didn't understand. "They're watching," before collapsing into silence. I realized with horror that it wasn't just the forest we had to fear. It was something that thrived here, ancient, patient, and cruel. I had to keep moving. There was no turning back. And somewhere behind me, the thing, or things, followed, silent but ever present. Hours blurred into one long nightmare. My mind teetered on the edge of sanity, exhaustion, and fear-warping reality. I finally stumbled upon a small abandoned ranger cabin, the windows shattered and the door hanging on broken hinges. Hope surged. I might be able to find shelter, maybe even call for help. Inside, the cabin was worse than the forest. Scattered supplies, overturned furniture, and on the wall, scratched into the wood, were names. Hundreds of them. Faded, old, some fresh. I scanned the list frantically. And there, at the bottom, I saw 3 new names: Mark, Jenna, and mine. A chill ran down my spine. The whispers returned, closer now, circling the cabin. I could hear footsteps on the roof, in the walls, above and below. I pressed myself against the cold wooden floor, heart hammering, praying they wouldn't notice me. And then I felt it. A presence, impossibly close, bending the air around me, waiting to strike. Whatever had taken the campers before, it wasn't done. It never was. I waited, barely breathing, every nerve screaming. Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from the ceiling. I forced myself to peek up, flashlight trembling in my hands. The roof was crawling with shadowy figures, their elongated limbs moving unnaturally, watching me with those yellow, predatory eyes. I bolted, throwing the cabin door open and running blindly into the forest. The whispers and growls followed me, echoing off unseen rocks and twisted trees. Every tree I passed seemed to bend toward me, branches clawing at my clothes, pulling me back. Eventually, I collapsed by a creek, soaked and trembling. I thought maybe I had escaped. Maybe the forest had finally released me. But when I looked across the water, I saw movement, Mark and Jenna standing perfectly still, eyes wide and empty, reflecting the moonlight. They didn't move, didn't speak. And then, slowly, they began walking toward me. But their movements weren't human. They were wrong. I screamed, stumbling back, and realized that the nightmare had only just begun. I ran until my legs gave out. I don't know how long I'd been running. Hours, days, maybe years. It felt eternal. When I finally reached the edge of the forest, the trees stopped abruptly, like a wall of darkness cutting me off from the world. I collapsed, gasping. And the last thing I saw before everything went black was Mark and Jenna standing at the tree line. Their faces were familiar, yet distorted, twisted into something unrecognizable. And behind them, the creature, tall, hunched, yellow eyes glowing, limbs impossibly long, watched. Then, they disappeared. I survived somehow, but the memory haunts me every night. I know Pine Ridge still waits, patiently, for the next campers who think they can brave its trails. And I know that when the whispers return, I will hear them again, calling, always calling. The forest doesn't forgive. The forest doesn't forget. And sometimes, it lets you leave, only to watch you from the shadows. My name is Sarah, and I never imagined that a simple camping trip could turn into a nightmare I would never forget. My friends and I had always loved the outdoors, and when we discovered Cedar Hollow, a dense forest tucked away from the city, we thought it would be the perfect weekend getaway. The air smelled crisp, tinged with pine, and the winding trails promised adventure. We set up camp near an old clearing, the kind of place where sunlight barely pierced the thick canopy. That evening, as the fire crackled, I felt an odd sensation, like tiny eyes tracking me through the darkness. My friends joked about forest ghosts and whispered legends of hikers vanishing in Cedar Hollow, but I didn't laugh. Around midnight, I was woken by a soft, almost melodic whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the sound was deliberate, rhythmic, repeating my name. I nudged my friend Emily, who was sleeping beside me, but she didn't stir. I shined my flashlight into the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees that seemed taller than before, their twisted branches swaying despite the still air. I whispered back, unsure why I was speaking out loud. "Who's there?" The forest responded with a low, rustling chorus, and I could swear the trees themselves were leaning closer, listening, whispering. Warning, I decided to investigate, thinking the whispers might be an animal or another camper playing a prank. As I walked, the trees seemed to shift subtly, forming paths I didn't recognize. Every time I paused, the whispers grew louder, almost chanting my name in unison. My heart raced as the sense of being watched intensified. Emily and the others had stayed behind, asleep, oblivious to the forest's subtle malevolence. The deeper I went, the darker it became. Shadows moved against logic, stretching across paths where no source of light existed. Then I noticed strange markings on the tree trunks. Thin, vertical scratches, not random, but deliberate, as if the trees themselves were etched with symbols I couldn't decipher. A cold breeze brushed my neck, carrying the unmistakable scent of decay. I froze. Something, or someone, was moving silently behind me. Every instinct screamed to run, but I was paralyzed, caught in a hypnotic pull toward a faint light, flickering deeper in the woods. Then I heard a voice. Not human, not entirely. It whispered my name again, softer this time, with a tone that was almost mournful. Something was calling me, urging me to step closer. And in that moment, I realized I was completely alone, except for whatever lived in the shadows of Cedar Hollow. As I approached the light, I realized it wasn't a fire. It was something unnatural, glowing faintly like the last remnants of a dying sun. The whispers now surrounded me, echoing from every direction, making it impossible to tell where they originated. My flashlight flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to form faces in the bark of the trees. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted. Roots emerged from the soil, twisting and curling around my ankles as if the forest itself were trying to trap me. I screamed, pulling free, and stumbled backward, heart hammering. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices overlapping, some pleading, some mocking, some screaming in silent terror. Then, I saw her. A figure, partially obscured by mist, standing among the trees, pale, elongated, with hollow eyes that reflected the faint light. She raised a hand, beckoning me forward. I froze, unsure whether she was real, a ghost, or a trap. The whispers now seemed to come from her mouth, repeating my name, urging me to follow. I turned to run, but the forest had changed. The path I came from was gone, replaced by a wall of gnarled trees. No matter which direction I turned, I ended up facing the same figure, waiting patiently, silently commanding me to step closer, or face whatever punishment Cedar Hollow had reserved for intruders. I ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks, the whispers never ceasing. The figure never followed closely. It didn't need to. It seemed to bend the forest around her, shifting the trees, creating paths that led nowhere. Panic overtook me, each breath ragged, each step slower than the last. Eventually, I reached a small clearing. At first, it appeared empty, but the ground was littered with small, half-buried bones. My stomach turned. I realized these weren't animal bones. The shapes were too human. Something terrible had been feeding, or at least keeping trophies. The figure emerged again, stepping into the dim light, her eyes hollow and unblinking. A low, guttural sound came from deep in the woods, and I realized it wasn't just her. Something else lurked nearby. Something massive, unseen, moving silently, watching. I had to escape. I ran toward what I thought was the edge of the forest, but the trees twisted unnaturally, looping back as if I had never left. I was trapped in a labyrinth of darkness and whispers, a living maze designed to torment intruders. Fear clawed at me, but I refused to stop. And then, the whispers became words. My name, repeated again and again. This time, the words weren't soft. They were commanding. Stay. Forever. I forced myself to keep running, though the forest seemed endless. Every path I took twisted unnaturally, looping back on itself. The whispers followed, echoing from every direction, sometimes soft, sometimes deafening. My flashlight flickered violently, and I could swear the shadows themselves were moving toward me, reaching with gnarled, elongated fingers. Suddenly, I tripped over something soft. Looking down, I realized it was clothing. Emily's jacket torn and smeared with mud. My heart sank. She had been here, and she hadn't left willingly. A cold wind passed through me, carrying a faint, sickly sweet smell like rotting flowers. The whispers grew louder, forming a chorus that seemed to chant, "Join us! Join us!" In the center of the clearing, the pale figure appeared again, now accompanied by others. Faint, shadowy shapes hovering between the trees, indistinct but human-like. They didn't move like humans. Their motions were jerky, unnatural, almost puppet-like, and all of them were watching me. The forest itself seemed to lean in, bending toward me, alive and aware. I knew running wasn't enough. I had to fight whatever this was, even if I didn't know how. But every instinct screamed that the forest had already claimed me as its next victim, and I was running out of time. Climbed a fallen tree to gain some perspective, hoping to see an escape route. From above, the forest stretched endlessly. A labyrinth of twisted roots and leaning trees, shadows shifting unnaturally. The whispering grew louder, forming coherent sentences now. Don't leave. Don't leave. I could almost feel the forest's desire pressing down on me. Then I saw it. A faint light in the distance. Hope surged. I jumped down and ran toward it, tripping over roots, branches scraping my arms and face. The light grew stronger, revealing a small abandoned ranger cabin, its windows boarded but dimly illuminated from inside. My pulse raced. I thought it might be safety, or at least temporary shelter. I reached the door and pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick, dusty, and oddly cold. The floor was covered in debris, and the walls were scratched with hundreds of names. At first, I thought it was graffiti. But as I approached, I noticed fresh names, written as if by hand just hours ago. Emily, Sarah. A cold presence entered behind me. I spun around and saw the pale figure in the doorway, motionless, eyes glowing faintly. The whispers crescendoed, surrounding me, forcing my knees to buckle. I knew then that leaving the forest alive wasn't just unlikely, it might be impossible. I backed into the corner, trying to gather my courage. The whispers became almost tangible, brushing against my skin like invisible fingers. I stumbled across the floor and found a trap door, half hidden beneath debris. Desperation overrode fear. I lifted it and climbed down into the darkness below. The basement, or whatever it was damp and cold. The faint glow of phosphorescent fungi revealed piles of debris, some human, some indistinguishable. Shapes stirred in the shadows, silent, watching. I realized I wasn't alone. Whatever had claimed Cedar Hollow's campers had a home here too. Suddenly, I heard Emily's voice. Weak, broken, distant. "Sarah, help me." I followed it, weaving through corridors formed by roots and mud. Every step echoed unnaturally, and I felt the presence grow closer behind me. The whispers now spoke in multiple voices, overlapping, pleading, mocking, angry. At the end of the tunnel, I saw her, Emily, pale, hollow-eyed, staring at me. But she wasn't herself. Her movements were jerky, puppet-like. I reached out, screaming her name, but she recoiled, letting out a high-pitched, inhuman wail. Behind her, the pale figure loomed, taller and more grotesque than before, watching with those unblinking yellow eyes. I bolted past Emily, not knowing if she was friend or foe. The whispers now felt physical, pressing against me, slowing my movements, disorienting my senses. The forest, or the thing that controlled it, was bending reality? The walls of roots twisted, forming impossible shapes, paths that looped back endlessly. I stumbled into a larger cavern, faintly lit by the same sickly glow as before. Shadows danced on the walls, forming distorted faces that screamed silently. At the center, dozens of pale humanoid figures, hunched and jerky, stood motionless, staring at me with hollow eyes. Some wore fragments of clothing from previous victims. One figure stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Its voice, a distorted whisper, echoed inside my skull. "You can't leave. You belong here." I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. Panic and terror consumed me. The cavern seemed to close in, the shadows growing taller, twisting around the figures. I realized then that this was not a forest, not a place. It was a predator, a sentient trap, feeding on fear, collecting lost souls, whispering them into submission. and I had become its next prize. I ran blindly, desperate, feeling the cavern walls move, the floor shifting beneath my feet. The whispers chased me, overlapping with Emily's distorted voice, with others I couldn't recognize. The pale figure appeared again, now accompanied by smaller, faster shadows darting across the floor, herding me like prey. I tripped into a shallow pool of water. My reflection, distorted, elongated, monstrous, stared back at me. I realized the forest had started to change me, to warp my very essence. Every thought, every movement, every scream belonged to it now. I clawed my way out and ran into a narrow tunnel, hoping for an exit. At the tunnel's end, a faint patch of moonlight flickered through the branches. I could see the forest floor beyond, normal-looking, inviting. Relief surged through me, but instinct screamed that it was a trap. The whispers grew louder, now shrieking, "Return! Return!" I sprinted into the open, emerging into the night. The forest appeared normal, serene, silent. But I knew better. The whispering trees were patient, waiting, and some part of me had already been claimed, twisted, and left behind. I escaped Cedar Hollow, or so I thought. Back in my apartment, the city lights felt like salvation. But I knew the truth. At night, I can hear it, the whispers. Soft, melodic, calling my name. My dreams are filled with twisted trees, hollow-eyed figures, and endless corridors of roots. I don't dare return to the forest. Some part of me knows it's waiting, just beyond the tree line, patient and eternal. I tell this story to warn anyone who ventures into the wilderness alone. Some forests are alive, and some trees never forget. They listen, they watch. And if you stay too long, they whisper your name until you belong to them. I survived, but the whispering trees took something from me, something I can never reclaim. And now, when the wind rustles the leaves, I pause, because I know it's listening. My name is David, and I learned the hard way that curiosity can be deadly. I'd been an avid hiker for years, and the idea of camping alone in the remote Black Pine Mountains excited me. I wanted peace, solitude, and the thrill of exploring untouched trails. I didn't realize that some places are untouched for a reason. I arrived at dusk, setting up camp in a small clearing near a rocky incline. The sun dipped behind the mountains quickly, leaving the forest in near complete darkness. The air smelled of damp pine and wet earth. At first, everything seemed normal, but as I unpacked, I noticed the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the oppressive, unnatural kind, where even the wind seemed afraid to blow. I brushed it off as nerves. I had my map, compass, and flashlight. Still, an unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. As night fell, I heard a faint cracking of branches, not from animals, but from something larger, something deliberate. I called out, but only the echo of my own voice answered. Around midnight, I heard a whispering voice calling my name, soft but unmistakable. My heart raced. I turned, scanning the tree line with my flashlight. A figure appeared in the shadows, a man, disheveled, with torn clothing and wide, terrified eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice trembling. They're still watching." Before I could ask who he meant, the figure bolted into the forest, vanishing as quickly as he appeared. I didn't know whether to follow or stay put, but instinct told me that the forest had already marked me. I sat by the fire, trying to calm my nerves, but sleep was impossible. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made me jump. By morning, the forest seemed normal, almost inviting, but I knew better. Something had watched me throughout the night, unseen yet aware. I decided to follow the path where the man had disappeared, hoping to find some answers. The trail was overgrown, twisting unnaturally, and my sense of direction faltered. After a few hours, I discovered remnants of a campsite. Torn blankets, crushed food, and a backpack with initials barely visible. I froze when I saw the name. E.R. I didn't know him, but my stomach sank. This wasn't the first disappearance. The deeper I ventured, the forest seemed to change around me. Familiar landmarks shifted. Paths I had just walked reappeared twisted, like the forest itself was a maze, deliberately misleading. A low hum began, subtle at first, then growing louder. It wasn't musical. It was almost a pulse, vibrating through my bones, setting my teeth on edge. Suddenly, I saw footprints. Not mine, not human. Long, clawed, and oddly spaced. They led toward a dense thicket, where the shadows moved unnaturally. I realized then that the man I saw last night had stumbled into something far worse. And now, I was following in his footsteps. I forced myself to move forward, fear gnawing at my resolve. The deeper I went, the darker it became. Even though the morning sun still hovered above the canopy, the shadows seemed alive, stretching and shifting as I walked. I could hear whispers again, unintelligible but full of malice, echoing through the trees. I stumbled upon a rock formation, a small cave. Inside, the smell of decay was overwhelming. I shined my flashlight on the walls, and my stomach sank. Scratches and claw marks covered every surface, some deep enough to leave splinters in the rock. I could see shapes etched faintly in dried blood, symbols that made no sense, but felt ancient, almost ritualistic. Then I heard it. A whisper directly behind me, soft and urgent. "David, don't go further." I spun around. The disheveled man from last night emerged from the shadows, but his eyes were blank, lifeless, and his mouth moved in jerky, unnatural motions. He stepped back as if forced, muttering something I couldn't understand. I knew then that he was no longer human, or that whatever claimed this forest had started its work on him. The realization hit me. This place didn't just trap hikers. It consumed them, twisting their minds and bodies into something else entirely. And the forest wanted me next. I fled the cave, my heart pounding, adrenaline pushing me through twisting trails and dense underbrush. But the forest had changed. Trees that I passed moments ago seemed to shift positions. Paths I knew led me back to the cave entrance, as if the land itself conspired against me. The whispers grew louder, forming words now. "Stay. Become one. Join us." My hands shook as I gripped my map, realizing it was useless. Compasses spun wildly, failing me completely. The forest didn't obey the rules of reality. It had its own, and I was trapped inside them. Then I saw movement among the trees. Figures, pale and hunched, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes watching me. They didn't approach directly. Instead, they moved with uncanny precision, herding me like prey. Panic surged, but I knew hiding wouldn't help. I had to move forward, blindly trusting my instincts. The forest floor seemed to pulse beneath me, roots curling toward my feet like serpents. Every misstep threatened to entangle me, slow me, trap me. And above it all, the whispers crescendoed, guiding me toward something or someone. I feared I would never escape. My legs burned, lungs heaving, as I ran through the forest that no longer felt natural. The trees leaned inward, almost as if they were alive, reshaping the path to trap me. The whispers now sounded like multiple voices, overlapping, some pleading, some laughing, some screaming my name. Each step I took seemed to echo unnaturally, following me, mocking me. Suddenly, I tripped over something hidden beneath the leaves. I fell face first into damp soil, and my flashlight skittered across the ground. When I grabbed it, I shone it toward the source of my stumble. The body of a hiker, mangled, pale, twisted unnaturally, lay sprawled across the roots. I froze. The man's eyes opened slowly, empty, lifeless, yet somehow aware. A low guttural growl escaped his throat. I scrambled to my feet and ran, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. The shadows moved faster now, more aggressive, herding me toward a narrow gorge I hadn't noticed before. The wind carried whispers that promised death and eternal imprisonment. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but I knew there was no going back. Only forward, deeper into the forest's trap. And then I heard it. Laughter. Children's laughter, soft at first, echoing from all directions. It was wrong, innocent yet corrupted, twisted by whatever haunted Black Pine Mountains. The realization hit me. This forest didn't just trap adults. It preyed on every lost soul foolish enough to enter. The gorge was narrower than it seemed, walls of jagged rock on either side. I squeezed through, heart hammering, knowing that one misstep could be fatal. The shadows above shifted like living entities, reaching toward me with elongated claw-like limbs. The whispers became coherent sentences now. You can't leave. You belong. I stumbled upon a small alcove, barely large enough to hide in. My hands trembled as I grasped the rock walls, feeling faint scratches, remnants of previous victims. My flashlight flickered, revealing strange carvings in the rock, symbols that pulsed faintly as if alive. I realized these were not random. They were markings of the forest's hunger, warnings to intruders. From the shadows, I glimpsed movement. The pale figure from before emerged, accompanied by smaller humanoid shapes. Their eyes glowed faintly, unblinking, watching my every move. I felt the forest itself press against me, as if it were aware of my thoughts, my fear, my desperation. There was no sound of wind, only the unnatural hum and whispers. I knew that if I stayed here, I would be consumed like the others. Gathering courage, I bolted, praying that the narrow gorge led somewhere beyond the forest's grip. The gorge twisted like a labyrinth. Every turn felt identical, trapping me in a loop. Panic surged, and I began shouting for help. But my voice was swallowed by the forest, amplified only by the whispers that mocked me. The pale figure appeared intermittently, never walking but almost floating, her head tilting unnaturally, tracking my every movement. I stumbled into a shallow clearing. Bones, fragments of clothing, and broken camping gear littered the ground, evidence of the forest's previous victims. My stomach churned. Among the debris, I spotted a backpack with my initials faintly scrawled on a tag. My pulse quickened. Had I dropped it earlier? Or had the forest manipulated reality to unnerve me further? I continued running, deeper, feeling the forest's hunger pressing against me. Roots seemed to rise from the ground, blocking paths, twisting and curling like serpents. The whispers intensified, overlapping with Emily's voice from last night, fractured and distorted. She, or what she had become, was among the forest's servants now, and I could sense her presence guiding me deeper into the trap. Every instinct screamed to stop, to hide. But I knew it was futile. The forest wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, patient, and utterly relentless. I reached a cliff edge, sheer drop below. My heart sank. The gorge had ended, or so I thought. But the forest had no intention of letting me leave. From the shadows above, figures dropped silently, moving with unnatural grace, herding me toward the edge. Panic erupted into sheer terror. The whispers now roared in my head, Join us. You can't leave. Forever." I stumbled backward, nearly falling. The figures didn't attack but surrounded me, closing off every path. Moonlight illuminated their grotesque forms, elongated limbs, pale skin, hollow eyes. One figure stepped forward, raising a skeletal hand, beckoning me closer. Desperation took over. I ran along the cliffside, scrambling over jagged rocks, praying the terrain would offer an escape. Then I saw it. A faint trail of light leading to what appeared to be an abandoned ranger station, partially hidden by trees. It was a risk, but the only one left. As I ran, the forest seemed to shift violently around me. Shadows stretched, roots rose like walls, and the whispers became a chorus of threats, promises, and cries. The ranger station was my only chance. But even then, I feared it might be another trap. I burst into the ranger station. Dust covered everything, cobwebs draped the corners. For a moment, I felt relief. But the whispers persisted, echoing through the walls as if the building itself was listening. I found a small room with a door leading outside. I tried it. It was locked. Then I noticed names scratched into the walls, hundreds of them. Some were recent, some older, some barely legible. My initials were nowhere. Yet, my panic surged. A faint rustling behind me made me spin. The pale figures had followed or had been waiting. Their glowing eyes reflected my flashlight's beam. One figure stepped forward. Its movements were unnatural, jerky, puppet-like. The whispers now screamed in unison. "You can't leave?" I realized then that I had walked into the heart of the forest's lair. The ranger station wasn't a safe haven. It was a trap, another layer of its maze. I had to find another way out, or I would become one of the names scratched into the walls, another lost soul claimed by Black Pine Mountains. I ran toward a small vent, hoping it led outside. I squeezed through the vent and emerged outside into the forest. Moonlight illuminated a narrow path leading out. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed, fading only slightly as I ran. The forest seemed to pulse, alive and aware. Every tree a sentient observer. I finally reached my car hours later, heart racing, body trembling. The forest behind me was silent again, calm, almost inviting. I drove away, but the memory never left me. At night, I still hear the whispers, calling my name, promising that Black Pine Mountains aren't done with me yet. Some forests are alive, some watch, and some, like Black Pine Mountains, never let you go. I survived, but I know the truth now. The forest doesn't just hide secrets, it feeds on them. My name is Lisa, and I never thought a weekend camping trip with friends would leave me questioning reality itself. We decided to explore Pinewood Lake, a quiet, remote campground far from the city. The water shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and the surrounding forest looked peaceful, almost too perfect. We set up our tents near the tree line. Mine was closest to the woods, partly shaded, giving it a slightly eerie edge I ignored. The first night was typical. Laughter around the campfire, stories, roasting marshmallows. But as the fire dimmed and the others retired to their tents, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Around midnight, I woke to a soft rustle outside my tent. At first, I thought it was an animal or one of my friends playing a prank. But then I noticed something strange. A dark figure, tall and humanoid, standing perfectly still near my tent. I froze. It didn't move, didn't breathe. Or at least I couldn't see it if it did. I whispered my friend's name, hoping for a reaction. The figure tilted its head slowly, almost mockingly, before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. My heart pounded, and sleep abandoned me completely. I spent the rest of the night clutching my flashlight, every shadow outside my tent a potential threat. By morning, the campsite seemed normal. My friends laughed at my paranoia, teasing me for being jumpy. But I couldn't forget that shadow. Something had been there, watching, waiting, and I had no idea why. The following evening, unease clung to me like a second skin. I stayed close to my friends, trying to appear normal, but every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. I could feel unseen eyes tracking me from the darkness. As night fell, we returned to our tents after a brief hike. I tried to distract myself with a book, but the forest silence was oppressive, unnatural. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, almost inaudible, coming from outside my tent. "Lisa," it breathed. I froze, heart hammering. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent. The forest was empty, or so it appeared. I scanned the tree line carefully. Shadows shifted unnaturally, bending as though watching me. Then I noticed footprints in the mud, barefoot, long, with unnaturally spaced toes. They stopped abruptly at the edge of the tree line, as if whoever, or whatever, had been there vanished into thin air. I called out for my friends, but no one answered. The wind picked up, carrying faint whispers that weren't human, echoing through the trees. I knew I wasn't alone. Something had returned, waiting, patient, unseen, but undeniably real. I stayed awake that night, listening to the forest breathe and whisper. At one point, I swore I saw the shadow slip between the trees. It didn't run. It glided, silent and deliberate. Fear clawed at me, but I tried to remain rational. Perhaps it was my imagination. Except the next morning, I found scratches along the outside of my tent, deep and deliberate, not present the night before. My friends dismissed it as branches or animals. I wanted to believe them, but the scratches were in patterns, vertical and jagged, almost like letters, forming symbols I didn't understand. A cold chill ran down my spine. Something had tried to communicate or warn me. During the day, the forest seemed normal, inviting even. Birds sang, the lake reflected the sun, and the air smelled fresh. But I couldn't shake the sense that I was being studied, analyzed. Every rustle, every distant sound seemed amplified. The forest had a rhythm, and I was a discordant note within it. That night, the shadow returned. This time, it lingered at the edge of my tent, not moving but radiating a palpable malice. I held my flashlight up, trying to illuminate it, but the light seemed to bend around the figure, refusing to reveal it fully. The whisper came again, closer, insistent. "You shouldn't be here." I tried to sleep, but exhaustion never came. Every creak of a branch, every murmur of leaves kept me on edge. Around midnight, my flashlight flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped me completely, and the whispering intensified. "Lisa, come out." I unzipped the tent slowly, expecting to confront the shadow, but there was nothing. The forest seemed still, almost mockingly calm. I thought about running, but where could I go? The shadow was everywhere and nowhere, existing beyond the boundaries of reason. Suddenly, movement caught my eye. The shadow was closer than I thought, its outline forming humanoid features. I couldn't see a face, but I felt its gaze pierce me. It leaned forward, and I heard a faint scraping noise, like nails across the tent fabric, before it vanished again. Panic overtook me. I ran to my friend's tent, shaking them awake. They were groggy but listened as I recounted everything. They tried to calm me, suggesting I'd had a nightmare, but I knew better. The scratches, the whispers, the shadow, it was all real. And it wasn't finished with me yet. The next evening, I refused to be alone. I slept in my friend's tent, but the shadow didn't care. Around midnight, I felt it again. Its presence, heavier this time, pressing against the thin fabric. The whispering grew urgent, almost angry. "You can't hide." I shined my flashlight toward the edge of the tent. Nothing. But the air grew cold, icy against my skin. My breath formed clouds inside the tent. Then I heard it, scraping, deliberate, circling outside. I wanted to bolt, but my body froze. The shadow didn't just want to scare me, it wanted to trap me. I peeked through a small gap in the fabric. A tall, dark humanoid figure moved with unnatural grace among the trees. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, observing me as if I were prey. Then it vanished into the night, only to reappear behind me, though the tent flap had not been opened. I screamed, but no one else seemed to hear. Panic overwhelmed me. I realized the shadow didn't follow the rules of reality. It could appear anywhere, unseen until it chose to reveal itself. And it was growing bolder, more aggressive, each night pushing me closer to the edge of sanity. The following day, I noticed subtle changes around the campsite. Trees seemed unnaturally twisted, their shadows long and sharp even in sunlight. Small objects had shifted, rocks, sticks, even my friend's belongings. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring with the shadow, marking territory and eroding any sense of safety. That night, I refused to stay in a tent. I tried to sleep near the fire, but the shadow came anyway. It didn't make a sound this time. It simply appeared, a void-like silhouette moving effortlessly between the trees. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure that made my chest tighten and my hands shake. I grabbed my flashlight and followed it cautiously. Every step I took seemed mirrored, as though the forest duplicated my movements. Then I saw it. The shadow standing in the center of a small clearing, pale eyes glowing faintly from the void. It tilted its head at me unnaturally and vanished just as I approached. I began to understand. This wasn't just a spirit or an entity. It was something tied to the land, a predator that fed on fear, patience, and isolation. And it had chosen me. By the third night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadow looming over me, tilting its head, whispering my name in voices that weren't human. The whispers seemed to seep into my mind, threading through my thoughts, manipulating my perception. I decided to confront it. Armed with only a flashlight, I stepped into the forest, leaving the camp behind. Every tree seemed alive, the branches curling toward me. The shadow appeared again, just beyond the edge of the clearing. Its eyes were hollow yet penetrating, like it could see every fear I held inside. I shouted at it, demanding it leave me alone. The forest fell silent. The air grew thick, heavy, oppressive. And then, the shadow moved closer. Not running, not walking, but sliding across the ground like smoke. My flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of its elongated limbs, impossibly bent at angles that defied logic. I realized then that the shadow wasn't just stalking me. It was studying me, learning my limits, and waiting for the exact moment to strike. The realization paralyzed me with terror. I stumbled into an old, abandoned cabin I'd seen earlier near the lake. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, dust and cobwebs coated every surface. But the shadow followed. It didn't hesitate. It glided through the walls, appearing in every corner, every dark space, eyes fixed on me. I tried to barricade myself with a wooden table. The shadow paused, then vanished for a moment. A faint scratching sound echoed from the floorboards. I dared to look. A pair of footprints, bare, elongated, clawed, led to the center of the cabin and stopped abruptly. The air grew colder. My breath fogged in the dim moonlight, filtering through broken windows. Then, I heard a whisper, clear and sharp. "You belong here." I felt a sudden weight on my chest, like something invisible pressing me down. My flashlight flickered violently, then went out. The darkness became absolute. I could feel the shadow around me, moving, breathing, encasing me in its void. I didn't know if I was dreaming, hallucinating, or trapped in some alternate layer of reality. All I knew was that escaping alive would take everything I had left. I mustered the courage to flee. I ran through the forest blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, roots tangling my feet. The shadow followed relentlessly, never attacking, just observing, guiding me toward some unseen purpose. Every step I took, the whispers grew louder, circling me like a storm of voices. I reached the lake, its surface reflecting the pale moonlight. For a moment, it seemed peaceful. I thought perhaps water would repel it. I stepped forward, but the shadow emerged on the far bank, taller, more solid, its form shifting unnaturally. Its voice now echoed in my mind. "You cannot leave. Not yet." Desperation forced me to act. I sprinted along the shoreline, heart pounding, lungs burning. The shadow glided across the water's surface, almost floating, never slowing, always parallel, always watching. I realized then that this entity wasn't bound by logic or nature. It existed to terrorize, to instill fear, and it would never let me forget it. I had to survive, but the forest, the shadow, and whatever powers it held would haunt me forever. Dawn finally broke. The forest seemed calm, almost serene. Exhausted, I stumbled back to the campsite. The shadow was gone, or perhaps it simply waited, hidden, patient. My friends were waking, unaware of the horrors of the night. I packed silently, avoiding eye contact, feeling the whispers still faintly echoing in my mind. The scratches on my tent, the footprints, the glimpses of movement. I couldn't explain any of it. All I knew was that Pinewood Lake and its surrounding forest had a guardian of darkness, a predator that thrived on fear and isolation. I left that place, but the memory never faded. At night, shadows bend unnaturally in my apartment. Every breeze carries whispers, reminding me that some entities never release their prey. I survived, but the shadow in the tent is still out there, waiting, patient, watching. My name is Ethan, and I thought I knew what fear was, until I camped alone in the Cedar Hollow forest. It started as an ordinary adventure, a solo trip to disconnect from the chaos of life. The forest was dense and quiet, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, perfect for reflection. Or so I thought. I set up my tent in a small clearing near a brook. Birds chirped lazily, and the water reflected the late afternoon sun. Everything seemed normal, too normal. As dusk approached, the wind died entirely, leaving an eerie, unnatural silence. I brushed it off as coincidence. Night fell, and with it came the whispers. Soft at first, almost melodic, carried by the breeze, or so I assumed. "Ethan." I froze. The voice was faint but unmistakable, calling my name with a familiarity that made my blood run cold. I scanned the surrounding trees, flashlight in hand. The shadows between the trunks seemed to move, forming shapes that vanished whenever I focused on them. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, as if multiple voices spoke at once. I felt a presence, intangible yet undeniably there, circling my camp like a predator. The rational part of me tried to dismiss it as wind or imagination. But then I saw them. The trees themselves seemed to twist subtly, bending as if leaning toward me, their branches scraping together like skeletal fingers. Something in Cedar Hollow Forest did not want me there, and it made that very clear. I couldn't sleep. The whispers didn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, they returned, urging me deeper into the forest. I felt a strange compulsion, as if the forest itself was alive, communicating, guiding me. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously explored the perimeter of my camp. Branches scraped against each other, forming unnatural shapes in the dim light. The whispers seemed to follow, moving with me, coming from multiple directions at once. I realized I wasn't imagining it. The forest was speaking, taunting, warning me. I noticed the footprints, small, barefoot, but oddly long, leading from the edge of my tent into the denser trees. I hesitated, heart hammering. Should I follow them or retreat? Curiosity mixed with terror pushed me forward. Deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, older, their branches forming almost a roof above me. The whispers became words. Follow. Join. Stay. I felt cold fingers brushing my arms, though the air was still. Something unseen guided me, herding me deeper into the heart of Cedar Hollow. By the time I realized I had wandered far from the clearing, I no longer recognized my surroundings. The forest had become a maze, every tree shifting subtly, every path twisting unnaturally. I was lost, and worse, I sensed I had been led here deliberately. I stumbled upon a small circle of older trees, their trunks marked with deep carvings. Symbols, faces, strange patterns etched into the bark, as if the forest had a memory, recording past visitors. I felt uneasy, the whispers now urgent, almost desperate. Don't leave. Stay forever. I examined the markings closer. Some faces resembled people, twisted, elongated, hollow-eyed. Others were distorted, abstract shapes that seemed to move when I blinked. I realized these were warnings, or perhaps records of those who had entered Cedar Hollow and never returned. The path behind me had vanished. I tried to retrace my steps, but every tree seemed to have shifted, closing off the way I had come. Panic set in. I called out, hoping someone, anyone, would answer. But the forest swallowed my voice. Only the whispers replied, louder now, more insistent. I noticed movement in the shadows. Humanoid shapes flitting between trees, watching me, waiting. They didn't approach, but their presence pressed on me like a physical weight. I understood then that I wasn't alone. Cedar Hollow was inhabited by something ancient, patient and hungry for fear. Exhausted and terrified, I stumbled forward, trying to find the brook again. The forest resisted. Every familiar landmark had shifted. The whispers weren't just around me. They were inside me, threading into my thoughts, coaxing me to walk deeper, closer to whatever awaited in the heart of Cedar Hollow. Suddenly, I heard a loud crack behind me. I spun, flashlight illuminating nothing but gnarled trunks. The whispers grew frantic, almost pleading. Then I saw it. A humanoid figure, pale and gaunt, crawling unnaturally along the ground between two trees. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth moved, whispering my name without sound. I ran blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, roots tripping me. Every step, the forest seemed to stretch and twist, trying to trap me. I realized I was no longer hiking through a forest. I was trapped inside the mind of the forest itself, an environment designed to unnerve, confuse, and terrify. By dawn, I had no idea where I was. The whispers receded, leaving only silence. But it was the kind of silence that pressed in on me, heavy and expectant. The forest hadn't finished with me. The day dragged on, but I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Every sound seemed amplified. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping, birds squawking, all carefully orchestrated to unsettle me. I tried to follow the faint traces of the brook, hoping to find a familiar landmark. But the forest had become a maze. By nightfall, the whispers returned, stronger, almost chanting, "Stay, stay, stay." My flashlight flickered, revealing fleeting glimpses of pale figures among the trees. They didn't move like humans. They slithered, gliding with an unnatural grace. One paused, tilting its head in a mocking curiosity before vanishing. Fear turned to desperation. I stumbled upon a small clearing illuminated by faint moonlight. The ground was littered with human belongings, torn clothing, cracked tents, empty backpacks. My stomach churned. These were the victims of Cedar Hollow, each left as a warning to the next intruder. And then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing, impossibly tall, its body obscured by shadow, yet somehow aware of my presence. The whispers intensified. I realized I was being hunted, herded into a trap with no exit. I ran blindly through the dense forest, branches tearing at my clothes, roots threatening to trip me. The whispers followed, threading into my mind, urging me toward the center of the forest. I was terrified, but also aware that stopping would mean something far worse than fear itself. Suddenly, the forest opened into a massive grove. The trees were older, twisted like gnarled hands reaching for the sky. At the center, I saw hundreds of carvings, faces, symbols, grotesque forms etched deeply into the bark. The whispers became almost deafening, overlapping into a maddening chorus. "Join us. Forever." I noticed movement, figures emerging from behind the trees, stepping closer, silent but deliberate. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. I backed away, heart hammering. But the grove seemed endless. Every path led deeper into the maze. I realized I had entered the forest's core, the heart of its malevolence. The whispering trees weren't just alive. They were intelligent, ancient, and they hungered for fear. And now, I was their prey. I stumbled upon a fallen log and hid behind it, desperate for a moment to catch my breath. The whispers intensified, shifting to distinct voices from previous victims, calling out for help, pleading, screaming. Their faces appeared among the carvings as if alive, their eyes following me. The figures moved closer, circling me, gliding silently over moss-covered roots. I noticed one of them holding an old, broken lantern, dimly glowing with an unnatural light. It swung the lantern toward me, and I felt a wave of dread so intense my stomach churned. I ran again, heart pounding, lungs burning. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, paths rearranging themselves. Every tree leaned closer, every shadow shifted unnaturally. The whispering trees weren't just trees. They were extensions of the entities stalking me, intelligent, patient, and relentless. By now, exhaustion was overwhelming, but stopping wasn't an option. The figures were relentless, following me silently, forcing me deeper into the forest's heart. Escape seemed impossible, yet I had to survive. I tripped into a shallow pit, hidden by leaves, and landed hard. Pain shot through my ankle, slowing me down. The figures paused briefly, then advanced. My flashlight rolled away, and darkness swallowed me. I crawled forward, trying to stay quiet. but the whispers mocked every movement, repeating my name with glee. At the edge of the pit, I saw a narrow path leading upward toward a ridge. It was my only chance. As I crawled toward it, one figure appeared directly in front of me, impossibly tall, head tilted unnaturally. Its eyes were hollow voids, and I felt the weight of its gaze pressing into my chest. I scrambled past it, adrenaline overriding the pain. The path climbed, and the whispers followed, echoing from all directions, urging me forward and backward simultaneously. The forest itself seemed alive, reshaping, bending, twisting in response to my panic. By the time I reached the top, I could see the faint glow of morning. But the forest didn't release me completely. The whispers faded, not gone, waiting, patient, promising they would return. The sunrise broke the spell. From the ridge, I saw the campsite far below, the brook shimmering in golden light. Relief surged, but the forest wasn't done with me. Shadows lingered at the edges of my vision, and every rustle of leaves carried faint whispers. I ran downhill, ignoring roots, rocks, and branches that tore at my clothes. I didn't stop until the edge of the forest met the open road. Only then did I risk looking back. The trees seemed normal in daylight, their twisted forms hidden beneath the soft morning light. But I knew better. The forest had claimed part of me, a piece of my fear, my sanity. I realized then that Cedar Hollow wasn't just a location. It was a living entity, a predator, and anyone who enters becomes part of its memory. Even miles away, I could feel it watching, waiting, patiently, silently, whispering my name in the dead of night. Back in my apartment, the memories haunted me. Every shadow felt alive. Every creak of my floorboards whispered my name. I survived Cedar Hollow, but the whispering trees remained. I knew they were patient, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul. I warn everyone, never enter a forest alone, especially not one that feels too perfect, too silent. Cedar Hollow doesn't just hide danger, it lives, it thinks, and it feeds on the fear of anyone who dares disturb it. I left the woods behind physically, but not mentally. And I'll never forget the way the trees whispered my name, promising I'd never truly escape. My name is Jordan, and I never thought a simple weekend camping trip could turn into a nightmare. My friends and I had chosen Raven Creek, a remote forest that locals whispered about but rarely visited. The forest had a reputation for strange disappearances and eerie lights at night. Stories I dismissed as legends. We arrived just before sunset, setting up tents near a stream that sparkled under the fading sun. Laughter filled the air as we gathered firewood and shared beers. I was the last to retire to my tent, feeling a creeping unease I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the deep silence or the unnatural stillness of the trees. Around midnight, I woke to a faint glow outside my tent. Squinting, I saw a lantern hovering between the trees, swinging slightly as if carried by an invisible hand. My stomach dropped. My friends were asleep, and no one had mentioned bringing a lantern. I called out, but the forest swallowed my voice. The lantern drifted closer, light flickering in the darkness. Then it stopped. I strained to see, but the shadows between the trunks were thick, almost solid. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was being observed. The following night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed alert, flashlight ready, heart hammering. Around midnight, the lantern returned, moving deliberately closer. I watched, frozen, as it hovered near the edge of the campsite, swinging slightly. Its light was soft but unnerving, revealing only hints of movement among the trees. Curiosity pushed me forward despite every instinct screaming to stay put. I stepped into the forest, the ground soft with fallen leaves. The whispers began, a low, coaxing murmur that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Come closer. See?" The trees twisted in impossible ways, branches forming arches overhead, shadows bending toward me. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap. The lantern moved ahead, guiding me deeper, pulling me into the forest's dark heart. Shapes flitted just beyond my vision, humanoid yet impossibly distorted. I realized I had no path to follow. The forest had rearranged itself. Familiar landmarks had vanished. I was alone, and the lantern was no longer just a light. It was a lure. The lantern led me into a small clearing, where I discovered the remnants of old campsites. Broken tents, rusted cooking gear, and discarded belongings. Moonlight glinted off cracked glass bottles, reflecting the flickering glow of the lantern above one of the tents. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of voices, some pleading, some mocking. I noticed scratch marks on nearby trees, forming strange, indecipherable patterns. Faces seemed etched into the bark, distorted in agony. I realized these were not random. They were warnings, or perhaps records of past victims. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Shadows forming humanoid shapes, gliding between trees, watching me silently. My chest tightened, every instinct screaming to flee. Yet my legs felt heavy, almost rooted to the ground. The lantern pulsed rhythmically, as if breathing. Its light illuminated one figure more clearly, a tall, thin humanoid, face obscured in darkness, watching me with an intelligence that made my blood run cold. I tried to retreat, but the forest resisted. The path back had vanished. The whispers turned urgent, repeating my name in tones both pleading and sinister. The shadow figure moved closer, gliding soundlessly over roots and rocks, its movements unnatural and fluid. Every instinct told me to flee, yet I was compelled to follow the lantern. It pulsed, guiding, teasing, and I couldn't look away. The shadows twisted into grotesque forms, as if the forest itself had come alive, feeding off my fear. I fumbled for my phone, only to find it dead. The forest seemed to revel in my helplessness. Shapes flitted just beyond the lantern's glow, humanoid but elongated, their eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. It dawned on me then. The lantern and the forest were working together, orchestrating this nightmare with patient cruelty. I was no longer a visitor. I was prey. Hours passed, though I had no way of knowing. Exhausted, I collapsed behind a tree, hoping the entity would leave me alone. The lantern hovered above, pulsing faintly. In the faint glow, I saw more figures emerging, pale, elongated, moving with inhuman grace. I realized the lantern wasn't just a beacon. It was bait. The forest had been collecting victims for decades, each drawn into this meticulously arranged trap. My friends were asleep at the campsite, blissfully unaware. If they wandered into the trees, they would vanish like the others. I crawled along the edge of the clearing, desperate to escape. But every tree had shifted, every path twisted unnaturally. The forest seemed alive, its intent clear. It would not let me leave without torment. The lantern moved closer, pulsing, hypnotic. I felt a compulsion to step forward, to surrender. But fear propelled me onward instead. Adrenaline surged, and I ran blindly through the forest. The lantern hovered just ahead, pulsing like a heartbeat, guiding me deeper into the darkness. Roots tore at my shoes, branches clawed my arms and face, yet I couldn't stop. Behind me, faint whispers echoed through the trees, overlapping into unintelligible voices, pleas, laughter, and warning all at once. The forest seemed alive, shifting to block my path. Every familiar tree had changed positions, every shadow seemed to bend toward me. The humanoid figures moved with silent grace, emerging from the fog to flank my path, forcing me further into the forest's heart. I stumbled into a shallow ditch hidden beneath leaves, barely catching myself. The lantern floated above, illuminating nothing of consequence, but the shadows encircled me, testing my courage, pushing me toward panic. The whispers grew louder, and for a moment, I imagined the lantern itself was alive, guiding me like a predator herding its prey. I realized then that escaping wasn't just about running. It was about surviving the forest's will, the lantern's lure, and whatever intelligence manipulated them both. I forced myself to move, crawling out of the ditch. Every step was agony. Yet I pressed on, flashlight trembling in my hand. The lantern glided slowly ahead, pulsing, almost teasing me. Shadows danced between the trees, occasionally freezing as if aware of my gaze, then moving again with predatory grace. I could hear breathing, mine, quick and ragged, and something else. Something deep in the forest, patient and cruel. A tall, thin figure emerged from the mist, its limbs bending unnaturally. Its eyes were hollow voids, yet I felt them boring into my soul. I stumbled, falling onto my hands and knees. The lantern floated lower, illuminating jagged symbols carved into the nearby trees. Faces, twisted, distorted, screaming silently, seemed to emerge from the bark itself. The forest had collected victims for decades, and now it hungered for me. Panic overtook rational thought. I sprinted again, following any hint of a path, hoping instinct would guide me to safety. But the forest had no mercy, bending reality to ensure I remained lost. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. Exhaustion clawed at me, but stopping wasn't an option. The lantern floated slightly ahead, glowing softly, like a predator allowing its prey a temporary reprieve. The figures followed, silent and patient. Finally, I saw faint moonlight breaking through the canopy. I sprinted toward it, ignoring pain and bloodied arms. The forest resisted subtly. Paths stretched, shadows leaned inward, whispers grew louder. But I forced myself onward. I emerged onto a narrow dirt road. The lantern lagged, hovering at the forest edge as if granting me a momentary escape. Behind me, the forest seemed normal in the moonlight. But I knew better. The intelligence within those trees had marked me, and it was patient. It would wait, hidden, for the next careless wanderer. I collapsed onto the roadside, gasping, convinced I had survived. But the memory of that lantern, the whispers, and the humanoid figures would haunt me forever. Once home, I tried to forget. But shadows in my apartment seemed to move independently. Subtle whispers brushed against my consciousness when the wind was still. I could see the lantern reflected in glass surfaces, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Researching Raven Creek, I discovered decades of missing person reports. Every single account mentioned the lantern and the forest's sentience. It wasn't a myth, it was real. A predator that guided, tormented, and consumed the fearful. My survival had been an exception, a brief reprieve in its centuries of cruelty. Even now, I can't enter a wooded area without seeing lanterns flicker in my peripheral vision, feeling the forest's patient gaze. The entity remains, watching, waiting, intelligent and unrelenting. I warn everyone. Never follow strange lights in the woods. Raven Creek's lantern is patient, intelligent, and cruel. The forest conspires with the entity, bending reality, reshaping paths, and whispering to the lost. I survived physically, but the forest claimed a piece of my mind. The lantern burns in my memory, a permanent reminder of the terror waiting in the dark. And I know it waits still, patient, invisible, for the next wanderer foolish enough to step into its domain. I will never enter a forest without feeling its eyes on me, and I know that somewhere, deep in Raven Creek, the lantern still glows, waiting. My name is Elias, and what I experienced last summer still feels impossible to explain. I've lived most of my life hiking, camping, and backpacking across some of the most remote trails in Wyoming. And nothing, not bears, storms, or near-death slips, ever scared me as much as what I saw at Blackwater Ridge. I went with two close friends, Mark and Luca. We weren't thrill seekers. We just wanted quiet, fresh air, and time away from the city. The trip took a dark turn on the second night, when we stumbled onto something that shouldn't have been there. As the sun dipped behind the jagged ridgeline, we reached the campsite we had marked on our map. An open, flat ground surrounded by tall pines. But the moment we stepped out of the trees, we froze. There were 3 tents already standing in the clearing, perfectly arranged, facing the same direction, neatly zipped up. No bags, no fire, no people. Just tents. Same brand as ours, same model, same color. Almost like someone had copied our exact gear and set it up before we arrived. Mark whispered, "Guys, those look like our tents." He wasn't wrong. They were identical down to the tiny stitching pattern. Luca tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Probably other hikers with good taste. But my gut twisted as I stepped closer, because I could see something moving. Inside the center tent, something shifting slowly, rhythmically, like breathing. But there was no sound, no footsteps, no voices, just movement. And the forest around us fell completely silent. We stood frozen. The tents were perfect copies of ours. Same faded green color, same stitching lines, even the same tiny scratch from where Luca accidentally sliced his last summer. But the movement inside the middle tent, that was new. Before any of us could discuss it, the forest around us shifted. The wind stopped. The birds stopped. Not a single leaf rustled. It was as if the world held its breath in anticipation. Mark whispered, "We should check. Maybe someone's hurt." I wanted to say no, that everything about this place felt wrong, but I couldn't form the words. So we approached slowly. 3 steps, then halt. 2 more steps. Halt. The bulge inside the tent grew more visible with each step. It wasn't shaped like a person. It was too round, too low, too still. Only the rhythmic shifting indicated something alive. I crouched low and reached for the zipper. My fingers trembled. My breath shook. The zipper hissed open, and inside we found nothing. Absolutely nothing. No sleeping bag, no person, no animal. The tent was empty, but the fabric inside was warm, warm like a living body had just been there. "What the hell?" Luca whispered. Before we could react, the tent on the left began to bulge, then the one on the right. But this time, the movement was fast, aggressive, like something was clawing from the inside. The 2 tents shook violently now, the fabric stretching outward like something inside was trying to break free. The sound was soft at first, like someone dragging their palms along canvas, but quickly escalated into frantic scratching. Mark stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. Nope, nope, nope. But just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The tents went still, dead still. A long moment passed. None of us moved. Even the air around us felt trapped in place. Then, not from inside the tents, but from behind them, came the sound that still haunts me. A deep, slow exhale. Not human, not animal. Too large, too controlled. Luca whispered, "It's behind them." We didn't want to see it, but we had to. We peeked around the leftmost tent, and there, standing silently, was another version of me. Same clothes, same backpack, same hairstyle. Except his face was wrong. Expressionless, blank. Like someone had printed my features without understanding what a human was supposed to look like. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared with dead, glassy eyes. A twig snapped behind us. We spun around. There stood another duplicate of Luca, then another of Mark. Each perfect, lifeless, soulless. They stood in total silence, forming a semicircle around us. And then, all three of our duplicates smiled at the exact same moment. The same unnatural, stretched smile. We didn't wait to discuss what we saw. We ran, hard. Branches whipped our faces, roots grabbed our ankles, but survival instincts had taken over. We ran in different directions at first, but quickly regrouped when we realized the duplicates were following us. Not running, just appearing. Each time we looked back, they were closer, never moving, never walking. Just arriving. Teleporting? Manifesting? I don't know. What I do know is that every time I blinked, the duplicate version of me got closer, its grin widening like its face was stretching too far. We broke into a ravine and climbed down. Luca slipped and shredded his palm open on the rocks, but we dragged him forward. The adrenaline drowned out the pain. When we reached the bottom, we paused, chests heaving, lungs burning. But the duplicates were already there, waiting, perfectly still. Mark shouted at them, "What do you want?" No response. But then the forest itself answered. A low, guttural groaning sound vibrated through the trees, almost like the forest was alive and angry. A thick fog rolled in from all directions, swallowing the trees. And through the fog, more shapes formed, not duplicates of us, but duplicates of dozens of people. Identical faces, emotionless. Hundreds of them, all staring, all smiling. We scrambled out of the ravine, slipping on wet stone, tearing our clothes, scraping skin. The duplicates remained in the fog, their lifeless grins still visible, even as they vanished into the white. Our only hope was to reach the trailhead before night consumed us entirely. The forest around us felt wrong. Pathways had shifted, trees angled unnaturally, and the air carried a faint whispering sound, like dozens of voices murmuring in unison. At one point, we stopped by an old, rotting log to catch our breath. Luca's bleeding hand needed attention, so I unwrapped my medical kit. But before I could use it, I noticed something on the bandages. They were soaked, not with blood, but with the same muddy water we saw inside the empty tent. I hadn't touched the creek in hours. Neither had any of us. Mark whispered. They touched our bags. I turned slowly. Our backpacks sat under a tree where we had dropped them while running. And behind those bags were 3 tents, perfect copies, set up in the exact same formation as before. The same 3 tents that had been back at the clearing. They had followed us. The zipper on the center tent began to rise, slowly, deliberately, and the smile of my duplicate peeked out from the darkness inside. We bolted again, deeper into the woods. The forest floor felt spongy beneath our feet, like it wasn't soil anymore, more like something breathing under the ground. Everywhere we turned, more tents appeared, some half unzipped, some shaking gently, some completely still, all identical, endless copies. Mark shouted, "We're running in circles." He wasn't wrong. Each time we ran, the same rock formation appeared, the same fallen log, the same crooked pine. The forest wasn't letting us leave. At one point, we burst into a clearing and froze. There were hundreds of tents, all identical, stretching in rows. Perfect formation, like a military graveyard. And standing in front of each tent was a version of us. Thousands of duplicates, each one staring at us, each one wearing a stretched, unnatural grin. Then they all inhaled at the same time, a long, slow breath. The sound echoed across the clearing like a gust of wind, but colder, far colder. "Why us?" Luca whispered. But deep down, I think we all knew. The forest was choosing replacements. We didn't run this time. There was nowhere left to run. The duplicates stood silently, watching us with unblinking eyes. The rows of tents stretched so far that the horizon itself looked patterned. Then the duplicates began to move, all at once, all in perfect synchronization. They lifted their arms, pointed directly at us. A deep rumbling sound shook the ground under our feet. The soil cracked, and through the fissures came a warm, rhythmic vibration, almost identical to the breathing sensation we felt inside the tents. And then we realized. The ground was breathing. The entire clearing pulsed like the chest of an enormous living creature just beneath the earth. The tents were not shelters. They were openings. Mouths, maybe, or wounds, or portals. The duplicates stepped aside, clearing a straight path toward the center of the clearing. A single tent stood there, different from the others. Black, enormous, unzipped halfway, darkness swirling inside it like smoke. Luca whispered, trembling, "I think it wants us to go in." Mark shouted, "No, we're not walking into that thing." But then the forest whispered. 100 voices layered into one. "Choose." The command echoed through the trees. "Choose." Then the duplicates began to march toward us, slow but deliberate. We backed away until our heels touched the soft ground near the black tent. The air around it was freezing, humming with energy. Mark grabbed my arm. "We go around it. We do not enter." But when we tried circling it, the forest warped. Trees that were 10 feet away suddenly appeared inches from our faces. The ground shifted like liquid. Shadows grew arms and reached outward. The only stable path was forward, into the tent. Luca started crying, not loud, just silent, shaking sobs. He whispered, "If we don't enter, they'll replace us." He was right. The duplicates were now only a few feet away. Each wore that same stretched smile, their eyes empty, waiting to take our place in the world. I swallowed hard, took Luca's hand, grabbed Mark's shoulder. Together we stepped into the black tent. Inside was nothing. No fabric walls, no floor, no ceiling, just a black void stretching endlessly, and floating inside it were thousands of tents, infinite copies, infinite duplicates. Each tent opened and closed like lungs, breathing. We weren't standing anymore. We were floating. Gravity didn't exist here. But something else did. A presence, ancient, patient, curious. The duplicates were not the real threat. They were only the vessels. The forest was the consciousness. The entity beneath the ground was the body. And the black tent was its mind. A deep, resonant voice echoed from all directions and none. "Give yourselves." Luca screamed, the sound swallowed instantly. His body lifted higher, dragged toward a swirling cluster of tents. Mark grabbed him, yelling, "Hold on, hold on." I reached for them both, but then the duplicates appeared inside the void. Millions of them, all floating, all silent, all smiling, They were merging, dissolving into the darkness, becoming part of the entity itself. Luca's grip slipped. Mark's scream ripped through the void. The darkness swallowed them both, and then it turned its attention to me. The voice whispered, "Only one may tell the story." A violent pull yanked me downward, toward a collapsing tunnel of swirling black tents. Everything folded inward, light, sound, thought, until the world snapped apart. And I woke up on the forest trail at sunrise, alone. My friends gone, their duplicates gone, the tents gone. Only my backpack remained. I stumbled down the trail for hours until I reached the ranger station. They found me dehydrated, shaking, barely able to speak. A search team combed Blackwater Ridge for 3 days, but found nothing. No tents, no footprints, no sign my friends ever existed. Their families blamed me. The police suspected foul play, but I know the truth. The forest took them, replaced them, copied them. Sometimes, late at night, I see movement outside my window. When I look carefully, I see versions of Mark and Luca standing perfectly still across the street, smiling, waiting. I don't camp anymore. I don't hike. I don't go near trees. Because I know this, the entity beneath Blackwater Ridge is still searching for me. I was the one who escaped, the one who refused the merging, the one chosen to tell the story. And I know it's only a matter of time before it sends the duplicates to finish what the forest started. This is my warning. If you ever find tents in the woods that look exactly like yours, leave, run, don't question it, don't look inside. Because whatever is copying you isn't human.